Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be doing another episode of Marvel Monday. Alrighty, so in honor of Thunderbolts coming out this week, I'm going to be seeing it on Thursday. I'm incredibly excited about it. This has been one of my most anticipated movies since they announced it. I feel like a lot of the Phase 4 movies didn't sound very, very exciting to me. And a lot of the Phase 5 movies, honestly, also did not sound very exciting to me. But Thunderbolts growing up was one of the few comic book runs that I constantly read. I feel like it was just always fun team dynamics. I really liked the way that they would bounce off of each other. And they typically had a lot more conflict internally than like a lot of the Avengers and X-Men stuff. Like obviously X-Men comics, there's a lot of like drama that goes on. But I feel like with the Thunderbolts, it was always a fresh new lineup. So I really loved those comics growing up. So I've been excited for this movie for forever. And in this video today, we're just kind of going to be going through my big predictions. I'm going to go over like death odds. I'm going to go over any cameos that I think might potentially happen, talk about what I think might be going on in the post-credit scene, because the embargo is officially lifted with this movie. A lot of the people who've gotten to see it can now give their original reviews, obviously spoiler free, but a lot of people are, saying things that kind of not necessarily give away certain things, but are kind of like making it seem like some stuff might be happening and going down. So I'm incredibly excited to talk about this. I'm going to issue a minor spoiler warning. Like I said, I've heard some of the reviews, so I will be referencing some of the reviews. I don't think necessarily it will be a spoiler because, like I said, I haven't seen the movie yet. So let's make some final predictions, shall we? Okay, so the first thing prediction-wise that I want to talk about is death odds. Usually when I make videos like this, like I've done it for every single Marvel movie that's came out since Shang-Chi, I'll go through a list of every single character's names and do the death odds. I feel like that would be a little bit of overkill here. I think that one character is definitely dying, and that's Taskmaster. And I think the way that they're going to do it, and this is wishful thinking, I think that she's going to get killed off in the first act, and it's going to be something that later we find out that Val actually has been having different people replacing Taskmaster this entire time, so there's been multiple Taskmasters. I think that it's going to be a thing that, like, Val has worked with, because this might be a slight spoiler alert, so I'm going to give you a warning here. The actress that plays Black Widow's mom from the Black Widow movie, she's confirmed to be in this movie, and I think it would be really interesting if she's working with Val to kind of like recreate new Taskmasters and having somebody who can just, go out and do all the things that has all the skills that Taskmaster does. Because from my understanding, that was just kind of like a control chip in her mind, and they definitely could do that again. Like she was able to control the pigs in the Black Widow movie just by, clicking a couple buttons on an iPad. I feel like they could do that with Taskmaster. And then part of the reason we don't have a Taskmaster in the group later on in the movie is because they realized that Taskmaster the entire time was kind of like a spy for Yelena. And if Taskmaster is working close with them, Yelena can see everything they're doing. So either she dies, or they discover that relatively early on and are like, we can't work with you because we can't trust you. And so they just like outcast her. I think that it also would be really funny. Imagine a world Taskmaster doesn't die at all. They just discover that she's kind of like a sleeper agent and she's there to spy on them. So they just abandon her in the middle of the desert. And then that's like the second post-credit scene is her finally walking out of the desert. And she has no idea what's happened the entire course of the movie because she got left in the desert. I think that would be really funny. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but I do think that that would be hilarious. That being said, I think that Taskmaster is 100% going to die, even though it would be really funny if she doesn't. And then I think there's two other characters that I think both have like 50-50 odds. And I think that Marvel was interesting because they decided to release the cast for Avengers Doomsday relatively early on, and they have all these actors in it. But I really thought for sure Red Guardian was going to get killed off in this movie. I think that that was something that made a lot of sense. He is kind of like the emotional heart. And in Black Widow, a big part of his character arc was that he's always been a poser. He's pretended to be a superhero. He's never actually been a superhero. And so I thought that it would be really interesting if he died doing some big sacrifice in this movie. I think that he's somebody who has a lot of connections to a lot of other people in the group. But the other character that I think also has a chance of dying in this movie would be Wyatt Russell's U.S. agent. I think that he's a character that a lot of people would like to see him redeemed, but there's also a big group of people who are like, he's irredeemable, you can't fix what he did, which maybe I'm crazy for this. I don't think he did that much incorrect things. He publicly slaughtered one person, which, yeah, one person more than he potentially should have, but like in the heat of the moment, he was depressed, he went and tracked somebody down, and yeah, the guy might potentially be innocent, but like also he did kind of help kill that guy's best friend. I don't know. I'm not justifying what he did, but I'm just saying I think that he's a lot easier to redeem than a lot of people are making it seem But that being said, I think that John Walker dying is kind of a very similar thing where like he needs that big redemption moment of being able to be the person who makes the sacrifice play. And especially because I think that if Bucky wants to make a sacrifice play, it'd be kind of similar to in phase 1 where Tony and Steve are having that conversation and he's just like, you're not the guy to lay down on the wire, let the other people crawl over you or whatever. And he basically, gives him shit for not being the guy to make a sacrifice play. I feel like John Walker would prove that he is like Captain America and he would be the person to make that sacrifice play. And I think that that would be awesome. That being said, I don't think either of them are going to die. I will say my wild hot take for if one of them dies, I think that is going to be Red Guardian. And I think the way they'll do it is the post-credit scene. This is where I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a spoiler warning. I've been hearing reactions. There's one post-credit scene that a lot of people are comparing to the post-credit scene of Thor Ragnarok when Thanos' ship shows up and we're like, oh shit, we're gonna be in trouble now. I would not be surprised if there's a version of this movie where the post-credit scene is like a 4-minute long fight sequences that takes place shortly after this movie, and we all assume like everything's fine and everything's going to be okay, and then bam, and either an incursion happens or Doom shows up, they get into a really serious fight, Red Guardian gets killed off because they were kind of like let their guard down and they weren't ready to be fighting again. And that kind of shows off how powerful, if it's Doctor Doom, that shows how powerful Doctor Doom is. If it's, this fight against the X-Men world that is now having an incursion with them, it shows how powerful the X-Men are. I think that that's one way they could kill off an extra character in this movie. That being said, you don't need to kill off characters in every movie. And I think that for the longest time, Marvel fans would be like, oh my god, nobody ever dies in Marvel movies, and they were whining about it. And then we had Secret Invasion where they constantly just killed people off just because they can. So I definitely don't want Marvel to get the idea that we need characters to die, because we don't. And I think that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 did a great job of showing that everybody lived and everything was okay. So if there's not a lot of deaths in this movie, I'm not bothered by that. I think that makes sense. Alrighty, so for the next thing, we're going to go ahead and start talking about cameos. I've got about 6 characters here. I'm going to start with the most unlikely character and then work our way to the most likeliest cameos. So starting off, I'm going to say, and I've made this comment in every single prediction video I've made for a Marvel movie in the last 2.5 years, because Simu Liu put out a tweet back in 2022, I think it was like November, saying, you guys are going to be seeing me a lot sooner than you think, winky face. He's still yet to show up. But he's like, you're going to see me sooner than you think. I think Shang-Chi is making a cameo in this movie. I think that either it's going to happen throughout the duration of the film, and it's going to be like a very quick thing where they're like, I could see it being a thing where like Bucky's like trying to put this team together or whatever, and he's trying to be like, okay, who are these people that I can find? And then he can't find the people that he's looking for. So like Shang-Chi is somebody that like he envisions, and he's like, yeah, that's somebody I could potentially get. And then he's like, fuck, he's on the West Coast. And then he ends up having to settle for the Thunderbolts, which would make it even funnier that the Thunderbolts is the team that he ends up working with. That being said, I think that would be really entertaining. I think that would be kind of cool. Another thing about Shang-Chi potentially showing up, I could see it being a post-credit thing where they're kind of like getting the team together, because the Shang-Chi post-credit scene, in my opinion, is what a lot of the post-credit scenes since Endgame should have been, where it's like kind of like Avengers meeting up and having a conversation, being like, oh my god, there's this thing that's going on. And so I could see it being something like that where Bucky's kind of like debriefing the Avengers, because I imagine if the Avengers still do their little FaceTime holographic calls that they do, Bucky is somebody who should be invited to those. So I could see it being something like that where Shang-Chi shows up and kind of like helps him out and is like, hey, by the way, I'm the new guy. I don't know. Like I said, I'm starting with the least likeliest, so I do think that that's very unlikely, but I wanted to go ahead and say his name anyways. The next one, this one's also very unlikely, but he's sometimes New York based. We got Hawkeye. Obviously, he lives in his little farm that's in the middle of nowhere, but I could potentially see it being a thing where like he realizes New York is in danger and he's worried about Kate Bishop or something, so he goes to New York to go and potentially help him out, because realistically speaking, Bucky doesn't have a whole lot of friends that he could potentially call on, and I think that this would also be like I mentioned, I imagine there's going to be some sequence throughout the course of this movie where Bucky needs to assemble a team, and that could be something as simple as like him calling and being like, hey, by any chance, could you help me out? And then Hawkeye having to be like, my guy, I'm a father, please let me just sit this one out, or something like that. Obviously, I don't expect it to actually happen, but I wanted to throw his name out there because in the slight off chance that he does show up, It would be very interesting because he's another one of those. I like to think about the fact that like this is a very interconnected movie. He's one of those few characters where like he has interacted with multiple people here because like technically speaking, he has had interactions with Bucky. They were on the same team for Captain America: Civil War, and then he's had interactions with Yelena. So he technically potentially would be able to connect a couple of characters. Obviously, we don't really need them to make that connection like that, but I think that it would be interesting. The next character, we have Reed Richards. The reason I think that he's potentially going to show up in this is because I've seen a lot of people referring to this specific post-credit scene as the greatest post-credit scene that Marvel's ever done, and I think that a couple of things that would kind of have to play into that. One, it actually does set up Avengers Doomsday, like a lot of people are saying it's going to set up Avengers Doomsday, or two, it goes back to Marvel's old ways of back when they had post-credit scenes, it immediately tied into what the next movie is, and the next movie is going to be Fantastic Four, and I can potentially see this movie ending kind of similarly to how the Infinity War, is it Infinity War? It's either Infinity War or Captain Marvel, one of those two post-credit scenes where it's like everybody's like really depressed and bleak and everything looks like all hope is lost, and then surprise, Captain Marvel shows up. I can imagine it being something like that where like something happens towards the end of Thunderbolts, they are really in danger, and it's kind of like they have a rug pulled out from under them, like they solved the Void problem and now they're having a problem with Doctor Doom showing up or the Incursion showing up, and they kind of like call for help and they can't really get anybody to help them out. So the person who answers the distress call is these Fantastic Four, and then at the beginning of their next movie or whatever, or at the end of their next movie, we kind of get to see the tie-in and see how they go from, you know, their 60s futuristic universe that they're in to helping out our heroes in this universe. Obviously, I don't think that's gonna happen, but Pedro Pascal showed up at the event for their premiere, and that has to mean something because Marvel actors can't just show up to premieres. They have to be in the movie. I'm making fun of all the people who every single time Xochitl Gomez is at a premiere, they're like, oh my god, America Chavez is going to be in this, when she shows up to literally every premiere ever, because that person just absolutely loves the atmosphere. She loves being able to interact with people. She loves her job. So yeah, she's going to show up to premieres because she can just like email somebody and be like, can I go? And they're like, yeah, of course. But that being said, I do think it'd be cool if Pedro Pascal and they at least tease the Fantastic Four in some way. I think that it is one of those things where it's like, since it's not connected, I don't see it happening, but I could also totally see it happening in the sense that like there's an incursion or something. Okay, and it absolutely kills me that this one is still considered an unrealistic one. I want Baron Zemo in this movie. I've made this point every single time I've talked about the Thunderbolts since the first trailer came out. Baron Zemo should be in this movie. Once again, he's a character that connects multiple people here. Wyatt Russell and Bucky Barnes have interacted with him before. They've needed his help before. Nobody on this team necessarily is like smart and can come up with a plan. So having somebody like Baron Zemo would totally be very interesting. And also, one of my main complaints about it is doing a Thunderbolts movie without Baron Zemo is almost like doing an X-Men movie without Cyclops. Like, he's one of those main characters who's like in almost every iteration of Thunderbolts. Growing up, I've read probably over like 20 different Thunderbolts comics, and almost every single one of them had Baron Zemo in it. And oh, that's also why I included Hawkeye. A lot of the Thunderbolts comics that I read growing up had Hawkeye in it as well. But yeah, so overall, I really want Daniel Bruhl to show up in this because he's absolutely entertaining. He has so much fun energy, and I think that he's incredible. And then also, the way that they're hyping up the Sentry, or the way that Sentry is made in the comics, is he's like the most powerful of all the super soldier serums. He gets the serum that Steve had, but like dialed up to 100. And Baron Zemo, somebody who absolutely cannot stand super soldiers, I can see him wanting to work with, well, temporarily being okay with working with a couple of super soldiers to neutralize the biggest super soldier threat that they've ever had. And I think that would be really interesting. I think that the fact that Thunderbolts is supposed to be reformed villains and there's not any actual villains, I guess Ghost kind of, on the lineup does kind of upset me. And like I said, I love Daniel Bruhl. And I think that his portrayal of Zemo has been absolutely phenomenal, and I just want to see him again. That being said, if we don't get it, I guess I'll be okay. The second to last one, this one, I still don't think it's necessarily likely, but I think that Vincent D'Onofrio online has been making it very, very clear that he's like, oh, I can't show up in Marvel movies. Oh, it really sucks. I'm technically a Sony character. I can't show up in any of their big movies. I feel like that's a lie. I feel like he was only saying that to kind of get us off the idea that like he potentially might show up in this movie. This movie takes place in New York. He is the mayor of New York. I think that there's going to be at least one scene with him and Val. Once again, it could be a post-credit scene. I don't think that that's where they're going with the post-credit scene. I think that the post-credit scene is going to be more multiversal, but I could see that being a thing where they interact with each other. And the sequence where we see, like, Wendell Pierce, is that his name? The scene where they're having, like, the court hearing, and Bucky's in there, and Val's talking about how the Avengers aren't there, and they can't protect us anymore. I could totally see Kingpin being somebody who's just sitting in on that meeting, because it's something that's being held in New York. He's very anti-vigilante, but they're having a summit about, you know, Avengers and how we do need somebody to be our heroes. I could see him being there. That being said, would it be a very small cameo? Would it be unnecessary? Kind of. But do I love Vincent D'Onofrio and would love to see him in literally anything? Also, yes. But yeah, now the last one, and I think that this is without a doubt the most likeliest one, I think that Sam is going to have a cameo. I'm expecting it to be the same length as the cameo that we had in Captain America Brave New World, where they just, you know, Sam's dealing with whatever Sam's dealing with, Bucky is dealing with the stuff that Bucky's dealing with, and it's going to be something where, like, Sam just kind of checks in on him. It's just like, I hear there's a lot going on in New York. Do you need a little help with that? And he's just like, I think I got a couple of people who can help me out. And then, you know, that's where he goes and he picks up his team. Something very simple and short like that. Something where, you know, they just have a quick little interaction. And it ends with Sam saying, I love you too. Because for some reason, Sam didn't say, I love you too. What was up with that, Marvel? What's up with that? Bucky told him he loves him. And Sam didn't say it back. I'm not getting over that. That's crazy. Why did you guys do that? That's heartbreaking. But yeah, that being said, that was pretty much it for this video. That was pretty much everything I wanted to go through. I just want to go through death odds and cameos because I'm going to be honest with you, I still at this point don't have really much of a clue of what the plot's going to be. I don't have any idea how they're going to defeat the Void, and I think that that's exciting. I don't want to speculate too much about it because a big problem with a lot of Marvel movies nowadays is their expectations will be way too high, and then they go into the movie and it doesn't match their ridiculously over, you know, not possible standards. You know, like they're expecting the movie to be everything that in a bag of what's the saying I was trying to say? They want to eat their cake and eat it too. And they want to eat it again. And they want to have their cake and eat it too. But you can't do that. You know, not every single movie is going to be able to have every cameo in it. Not every single movie is going to be able to reference every other movie. Not every movie is going to be able to have like the flashiest fight sequences. So this movie is going to be good, and I'm going to keep my expectations at it still pretty high, but they're not way up there because I expect this to be a good movie, and I want it to absolutely blow my socks off when it's an incredible movie, if that makes sense. And I think that the more that I think about it, the more that I talk about it, the more that I try to dive into, like, how are they going to defeat the Void? And none of them are really that strong. How are they going to defeat him? Oh, well, obviously, Sentry at some point is going to turn against the Void, and then it's going to be a really interesting thing of, like, okay, well, the Void and Sentry, and they're fighting each other, and then everything that goes on with that. I don't want to dive too deep into that because I think I'm going to just let myself down, and I don't want to do that. But yeah, that being said, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and checking it out. I love and appreciate you guys so much for watching, and if you liked it, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one. Peace out. Bow. Bow, bow.